Segment tonight, how congressional Democrats and Republicans are trying to work together to deal with the China threat. Joining us are House China Select Committee Chairman Mike Gallagher and top Democrat Raja Krishnamoorthi. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. First, the common ground here is I think you both assume and can say that China is a threat. How grave a threat after you've been working on this committee together?
Well, in my opinion, I think it's our top geopolitical threat. No country has the military and combined economic power to challenge us in the way that China, and more specifically the Chinese Communist Party, does. I think it's important, however, in our work, and I think part of the reason there has been a sense of bipartisanship is that Raja and I have been very careful to make a distinction between the party and the people of China, with whom we have no quarrel and are often the victims of the Chinese Communist Party's authoritarianism and increasing totalitarian repression. But what we're trying to encourage our constituents and our colleagues to understand is that this isn't just a distant over there problem for someone else to deal with in the Indo-Pacific. It is a right here at home problem for us to deal with in terms of our sovereignty, the health of our economy, and how we defend American values, which are really, we think transcendent values. Human rights need to be at the forefront of our strategy.
Yeah, Congressman Krishnamoorthi, how big a problem is the imbalance in economic trade? We as a country, we sell them $150 billion. They sell us about $530+ billion. And then you add in the stolen technology in there is about $1 billion a year. So how significant is that economic threat?
It's very significant. In fact, we were actually in Wisconsin. I felt like I was on a diplomatic mission as a Bears fan, going to Packers territory a couple of days ago to be with Mike, where we had a field hearing at a factory that had absolutely been devastated by dumping by the Chinese company, their main competitor, who basically was dumping products at less than the cost to produce them. And so fortunately, both the Trump and the Biden administration put tariffs in place that, kind of level the playing field and allowed this company to come back. And now it's able to really thrive. But we shouldn't have to do that in the first place. They shouldn't be dumping. They shouldn't be hacking. They shouldn't be stealing intellectual property. And yet it's happening all the time. And that's why we have to protect our interests and our values and work with our friends and partners and allies to do the same.
Mr. Chairman, the administration, the Biden administration, has done some outreach in recent weeks. You look at the officials who've gone out there, Secretary Blinken mid-June, Treasury Secretary Yellen July 8th, John Kerry on climate change July 18th, and then most recently the Commerce Secretary Raimondo this week. And here's what she said coming back.
I pulled no punches in my meetings. They said the right things, and now we'll see how they react. But on the narrow area of emerging technology that they have said, right, they have a civil military fusion strategy. They're crystal clear about their intention. They're trying to get this technology to improve their military, and we have to do everything in our power to prevent that.
Washington Post Josh Rogan writes this, re-engagement turns out to be slow boat to China. Despite meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping in June, Blinken came home empty-handed. The Chinese government wouldn't even agree to establish a military-to-military crisis hotline. The most newsworthy part of Yellen's trip was that she inadvertently ate magic mushrooms, although she said she didn't hallucinate. And Chinese officials rebuffed Kerry's call for quicker climate action. Before Raimondo even arrived, Chinese hackers broke into her email account. Raimondo set expectations so low that her announcement of 2 new dialogues to manage U.S.-China economic tensions might seem like progress. Unfortunately, it is anything but. Point in reading all of that, presenting all of that, is that the outreach seems to be being rebuffed. Do you get that sense?
Well, that's my concern. And admittedly, I think I'm more skeptical of this renewed economic and diplomatic engagement than some of my Democratic colleagues. It seems that we slow-roll defensive action just to sit at the table, and then when the Chinese agree to something, they either don't honor it or they just sort of string us along in these talks. However, I think one thing, and I won't speak for Raja, but I think one thing that we would both support is the establishment of a military-to-military crisis communication channel so that we don't miscalculate our way into a kinetic confrontation in the South China Sea or across the Taiwan Strait. No matter where you fall on this debate of engagement, less engagement, I think we can all agree that Congress should step up and legislate lasting solutions to this problem, so we're not bouncing wildly back and forth between different executive orders or different administrations. We have a very important role to play that I think can endure and transcend different administrations.
So on the economic front, Congressman, should the tariffs, the current tariffs on China, remain in place, or should they be lifted?
I think that they should be in place, certainly for certain industries where, they're just not playing by the rules of the road, so to speak. There's economic aggression left and right. And, I think in other areas we have to see. But I think that these tariffs, provide a space for our industry to thrive and to compete. And so in that regard, I think that they are necessary.
If there's a majority here or a bipartisan consensus or any common ground, when would Congress act?
Well, we're going to be back in session in a couple of weeks, and there we have an opportunity to act on the military competition line of effort. We'll be considering the conference version of the National Defense Authorization Act. We have critical votes coming up on defense appropriations. So when it comes to ensuring that we are putting hard power in Xi Jinping's path so that he doesn't try and launch an invasion of Taiwan, which could cascade into a war that would make what's happening in eastern Ukraine right now seem, timid in comparison, there we can act. I think another area where Raja and I would like to see action based on our recent investigation is closing things like the de minimis loophole, whereby Chinese companies are allowed to ship things into our country without the scrutiny that they should be facing under the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. That's something we should be able to do by the end of the year. And then finally, in my opinion, we should stop allowing American money to flow to China, particularly Chinese military companies that are building things like aircraft carriers, artillery shells, and fighter jets.
Is it fair to say that you're singing from the same sheet of music here, that there is common ground on a lot of these things when it comes to China?
Oh, absolutely. And, one of the most interesting things that we've learned is that the CCP is counting on there not being common ground between Democrats and Republicans. They love it when we are divided, when we are arguing with each other and fighting with each other. And what they find very intimidating is when we actually come together, see the threat and the issues clearly, and then act in unison.
I don't want to break up that bipartisanship, but the Bears play the Packers on September 10th. Is there a bet that you guys are laying down, or?
I'm happy to wager something on TV right now, perhaps some delicious Spotted Cow beer or some cheese curds made here in Northeast Wisconsin. You name the wager, Raja, and I'm with you.
Never bet against a bear, including a Bret Baier, a Chicago Bear.
There you go.
I'm gonna put some deep dish pizza on the line here.
Perfect.
You heard it here. We're going to play this tape back on September 11th. Gentlemen, thank you very much for the time. You can see all the Common Ground segments on my podcast, Common